Good evening, members of the board, and to everybody watching us on Town TV. We are calling this meeting of the Oakville Public Library Board to order for Thursday, July 22nd, 2021. Members of the board, and well, I should ask, first of all, Madam Committee Clerk, do we have any regrets this evening?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay. And looking at the monitor, I do not. Oh, we are missing one individual who is signing on as we speak. We have a full house. Thank you, everybody. Members of the board, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest to declare this evening? I do not see any, so we're going to move right along to our confirmation of minutes from our previous meeting, which was held at some point in the past. When was it held? I do not like this agenda program. I just want to go on record. June 24th, 2021. Members of the board, are there any errors or omissions, questions, or business arising from those minutes you want to bring to our attention this evening? I don't see any. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as circulated. Janet and Susan, thank you very much. Any objections to the approval of those minutes? Seeing none, they are approved. Members of the board, we have 3 items on our consent agenda this evening. We have our list of outstanding board reports, our Oakville Public Library key agenda items, as well as health and safety report. Would you like to separate those items, or is there a motion to approve the staff recommendations? Councillor Hazethiel.
Can we just separate out 4.3? I have one question.
Sure we can. Anything else? I don't see anything else. Go ahead with 4.3.
So my question just is, in terms of these accidents or injuries, are we seeing them in terms of a specific branch, or are these all spread out?
They're pretty much all spread out. They range from accidents where people have dropped a book on their foot, somebody electrocuted themselves, well, slightly shocked themselves with a toaster. It's a variety of different things. There doesn't seem to be any theme. We keep keeping an eye on for it, though.
Okay, thanks so much. I'd be pleased to move it if you wish, Chair Noel.
Thank you. Will you move all 3 of the consent agenda items, please?
Sure.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder for those? Susan, thank you. Any objections? All 3 of the consent agenda items are approved. We do not have any confidential consent agenda items, although we do have confidential items that we'll deal with at the end of the public sessions. So we'll move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is our discussion items. And first is our 2022 budget driver report.
As we discussed at last board meeting, we are in process of creating the 2022 operating and capital budgets for the library. As we do every year, we bring forward a report as we start that process to really highlight for the board different budget drivers or budget pressures that we've identified early in the process. And so that's what this report does. It also highlights the direction that we've been provided by the town, which is to come in at the rate of inflation. So the town has identified that as 2% this year. Overall. So what I've highlighted for you is I've broken out the different drivers that we've identified. There are some differences this time around that we haven't really encountered in the past. I think this budget, if I'm to be truthful, will be quite challenging for us. One of the primary drivers is simply compensation and some of our contractual agreements that we have moving forward. Just to meet those, we're looking at a requirement of an increase of 3.1%. So just compensation will take us above what the town has directed. A number of other costs are related to COVID, one of them being the cleaning costs. So the board will remember that last year we had to add that in related to the COVID pandemic, but we were able to offset it with staffing savings due to our reduced hours. It is expected that we'll go back to our regular pre-COVID hours starting in the fall, which means we will not have that kind of savings moving into 2022, so we do have to account for it. Also COVID related is our continued expectation about where we can expect our revenues to be next year. That is hard to predict, but we are expecting revenues to come in less than what we saw pre-pandemic, so that is being built into the budget. As well as the board will remember that as budget planning for 2021, the library, along with the town, really identified areas that we could find savings in and remove for the budget for 2021, training, mileage, some other pieces, with the expectation that those would come back into the budget for 2022. So that is also in here, identified as the 2021 COVID-19 reversals. So these were items that were in our budget, were removed for 2021 in order to help mitigate some of the challenges to the town and the library for 2021, but we're always expected to come back into the budget for 2022 as we start that recovery process. The other two key things that I've put in here are the connection kits. The board will remember that we introduced the connection kits, I think the first set was in 2019, and then given the isolation impacts happening during 2021, we went out and we found grants, the United Way grant, in order to help us increase that. However, the grant money will run out in 2022, meaning that we'll have to take on the operating costs for those connection kits, in particular, the Wi-Fi hotspots. And that's an additional cost that needs to be put into operating. And the third thing in there was basically, well, not the third thing, but the last thing in there is really I put a placeholder, because we will complete the strategic plan this year. And until that is done, we're really uncertain about what we could do for 2022, but knowing that there will at least be some initiatives that we'll want to start in 2022. So I did put a $100,000 placeholder in, just as a kind of an indicator to keep it top of mind, that we definitely will want to look at introducing strategic initiatives as part of the strategic plan for 2022. So those are really the highlights of the operating. And then for the capital, we're bringing forward 2 capital projects. We don't have any kind of dollar amounts to them. We just had some initial discussions, and then FCM is currently looking at different options for us. One of them is related to Central Branch. Central Branch, all the branches had an accessibility audit completed, but as you would expect, a Central Branch did not fare particularly well during that audit. And so we're really looking at what we need to do to make Central accessible, and what we need to do to make it viable for at least the next 10 years, because that's the expected timeline for that. There's still a lot of questions about what will happen next with Central Branch that just aren't answered. So we're really looking at what do we need to do to Central Branch to make it accessible and to keep it a viable building for at least the next 10 years. So that's what we're working with FCM to identify, and we'll bring that potentially options for that in September for the board to consider. The second one is related to Woodside. All the other branches have undergone the one desk conversion that we started in 2016. Woodside is the one branch that doesn't have that, and it's particularly impactful due to COVID. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Woodside, but as you enter, there's actually a pretty good sized lobby, but then as you actually go to enter the branch, there's a circulation desk and the information desk are directly across from each other, and it really does cause an issue, particularly with COVID. So we're actually looking to move that one desk model where we would remove the information desk and really free up that space and make that public space. As part of that, we're also looking to the current quiet study room at Woodside supports a single individual. That was pre-COVID. And so we're actually looking to, now that we've moved to a decentralized model for our alternative service related to talking books, there is a giant room that used to house it. We're actually looking, as part of this, potentially turning that into a better quiet study space. And again, returning that to a more widely used public space. And then the third aspect of that is actually looking at the downstairs of Woodside, which only houses right now a program room and then staff space, but reallocating some of those rooms right now that are actually just housing storage for us and turning it into a potential virtual programming studio. Because we definitely want to continue. We see a really strong demand for virtual programming moving forward. And I think we've done a tremendous job over the past year putting that in place, but really setting up a designated space with some really solid equipment will allow us to take our virtual programming to that next level, particularly since I do think it will be a significant portion of our programming moving forward. So that's the ideas behind those 2 proposed capital projects. Again, working with FCM to come up with what that would cost, different options that'll come back to the board for consideration in September and then approval in October. And then the third one is just, it's one that was already approved, but we have not purchased the courier vehicle just because of a delay and the world circumstances over the past couple years. But we'll definitely be looking to do that, but costs have changed. So we're just looking to reprice that, and it may require an adjustment to that budget in order for us to be able to purchase the vehicle in early 2022. So that is the highlights of the budget driver report, and I'm happy to take questions.
Any questions, members of the board? Pankaj.
So I do have a question, and Tara, I know it's early in your budget process, but do you and your team go through an exercise of, where are the cuts, where are the opportunities, where are the possibilities? Do you do anything like a zero-based budget exercise? Like, how can we hold the line on certain things? And what's absolutely imperative, what's not, that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's definitely a process that we go through, and we're going to start that the next week or so, where we basically go line by line by line and really identify it. I will also mention to the board, just as a point of interest, that we've done that the last number of years. In the last number of years, the board will remember that we've had to go back and find cuts. So I'm not going to lie, we're getting pretty lean. But that's not to say that we will go through and we will try and identify to the best of our ability and then bring the board options about what we could handle internally and what may require maybe more public-facing adjustments in order to be able to meet that. That being said, one of the projects that I would like for us to do next year after the strategic plan is to do a full zero-based budget project. I think that would be really good. And for those watching or on the board, that's where we basically, if we were starting the library from scratch and we were re-envisioning it completely, that's that process. So that is something I've identified with the staff that I would really like to do next year, is take our strategic plan and really envision it, that if we were building our budget from scratch, what would we do? And so I'm really looking forward to doing that next year, because I think that may highlight some other pieces.
Is that enough, Pankaj?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? I have a question.
Yeah, Jeff, I have my hand up, but I don't know that you can see it.
Oh, I can't even see you.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Can I go ahead?
Andrew.
Thanks. Thank you, Tara. I am familiar with the desks at Woodside, and it occurs to me that where the information desk is right now is centrally placed, and it's curved, and it's actually quite an inviting location to approach staff and have that engagement. And I don't know that the desk across from it offers the same, sort of atmosphere. It's a little dimmer, it's a little higher, it's close to the back area, so the staff are frequently back and forth there. I just don't know if there are options to consider, using the information desk side instead of the other side, or if you're looking at lots of options.
Well, I think we've just given FCM kind of our wish list of what we'd like to see, and then looking for them to really bring forward potential options with their expertise. So that is definitely a potential.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Just to the IT booth, is there a way to get Andrew on the screen?
There isn't, because I'm afraid I don't have video tonight.
Oh, okay, fair enough. So you'll have to make sure you speak up when I call for quite like you did, because I can't obviously see you. Jen.
All right.
No problem.
Thanks, Tara. It's just further to Pankaj's questions and sort of inquiry. Is there been an analysis of sort of contracting services that we may not need to contract? Consulting fees, is that analysis still to come?
Well, that is part of that line-by-line review. We do have budgets related to contracts. Most of our contracts are related to FCM, but they're still reviewed. And then we do always keep some budgets related to consulting in there. So we'll go through, and we tend to look at like the 5-year average, as well as what we've used it for the past number of years. So that will be part of that process for sure. Okay.
In terms of the number that you gave in terms of getting 3.1 is the number that you gave, which is relative to if you met when we meet all our contractual obligations. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, it is a bit of a moving target, simply because we are going into union negotiations, like our collective agreement negotiations. So we do have an assigned amount for that because we do have to budget for it, even though that isn't complete yet. We are hoping that will be complete and that will be adjusted. As well, as part of our collective agreement, our staff move up a band every second year. And so for us, that would be 2022. So that is part of that, as well as just some other related to non-union compensation, just again, creating that bucket for that, we have that available.
Okay, so maybe the next time you come back, perhaps a little bit more clarity on the compensation costs and then the personnel costs, because I'm looking at them and I'm going, I mean, you're basically saying there's 320,000 there, but earlier on you're saying it's 134,800. You could just differentiate what is required and what is banned. That would be helpful, because it based on what you're telling us, this is one of the primary drivers that could put you over the targeted number.
Yeah, no, we can absolutely do that. The reason we did it to this is some of it is obviously confidential. So we just kind of put it all together. But as we go through the negotiation process and into September, we'll make sure that you get a clear breakdown, whether that's through open session or through a confidential report.
Could I also ask if you can report on any current vacancies that may not be filled if the number needs to be trimmed?
No, absolutely. And one of the things that we're doing, and we'll prepare for September, is looking at returning to regular hours. But I think I also indicated that as part of that, we're looking where we might be able to like move around hours in order to create, say, a full day on Sunday versus just a few hours, but working within the same envelope. And when we do that, we'll definitely look at our staffing component and see how it all kind of plays out.
Thank you. A further question is, has any discussion occurred with QE Park in terms of having regular access to their studio for the public library to second it to do their digital programming? I'm thinking about the Woodside and obviously there's a convenience to having it in the building, et cetera, but maybe Susan can tell us, but I thought QE had some pretty amazing studio space that isn't used all the time.
We could definitely have that conversation. I mean, one of the things, you're right, we were thinking about convenience, about how we can kind of schedule staff and have that kind of in our process without having to necessarily negotiate with what the public use is with that, but we can absolutely still have that conversation for sure.
Okay. And my last question is, if the asks are more than what can be approved, is there a report in terms of fundraising or sponsorship that could supplement the budget?
I'm not sure.
So as an example, the connections is a valuable thing for the community, but it may also be something that somebody may want to sponsor and stay. So rather than it comes out of the budget, it is actually covered through a sponsorship program.
No, and I will say Joe and his team have been doing a tremendous thing with looking at how we can expand our sponsorship. I will say that one of the things and this is maybe a different type of conversation for the board that we can maybe bring in September and October, is we've tried to create a really clear line about what is operational and what is not, and then what should be covered under the tax levy through the municipality and what we would use fundraising for in terms of like added services. So we can absolutely have that conversation, but I think the board would need to decide about what direction we really want to go in for that.
Okay, I'd welcome that discussion. Thanks very much for your time.
Further questions? I don't see, I'm sorry, Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, I just was asking for a little clarification. So the projected budget increase is 5.62%. Sorry, my phone is ringing. Anyway, and what is the town asking for?
The town is asking. The town has asked for departments to look at trying to stay at 2% or under.
Oh, so it's 2%. Okay, I wasn't quite sure. Wow. Okay, thanks.
Further? Just one comment with respect to the connection kits, and Janet touched on this about sponsorships. I had and I'm only raising this now so I don't forget later. I had an interesting call with, and Janet may have had it too, because I know they were calling other members of council, but an interesting call with Cogeco. They were very keen on finding opportunities to participate in the community and asked me to identify thoughts that how they could become more involved. And I didn't even think of that at the moment, but it might be something that I could connect you with them to have that conversation with their community outreach manager.
No, we're absolutely be open to those conversations. I will say that the town uses Rogers, so we'd have to look at the implications of us going with a separate piece, because the town manages those, but worth a conversation, absolutely.
Sure, okay. Okay, members of the board, one last chance. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion to receive the report, please. Pankaj and Bill, thank you very much. Any further comments or questions? Any objections to the receipt? Seeing none, that is received, and we're moving on to item number 6.2. That's the occupational health, safety, and workplace violence policy. And who's presenting that to us tonight?
I am, but before we do that, it just occurred to me, and I beg your forgiveness for this, but the outstanding board report, the board last year, or potentially even the year before, asked for a report to come with the budget around an examination of room rental rates.
Yes, yes.
And I just wanted to, because it'd been a while, I just wanted to clarify and make sure that still stood, or did the board want to make any adjustments to what that was? And just as a reminder, the board requested an overview and analysis of how room rental fees are developed, including comparison to community center room rates. And I just wanted to make sure that the board was still looking for that, or whether or not they wanted to tweak it, particularly since I'm not sure when we'll even start offering room rentals.
My opinion is, and I know I was a part of that conversation, I think it's still a very worthwhile conversation to have, because it's one of the few revenue drivers I think we have. So I would certainly like to see that that report at some point. Members of the board, does anybody have any contrary opinion to that? I don't see any.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm.
Yeah. Occupational health, safety, and workplace violence policy.
Yeah, so this report comes to the board for approval every year. There are no significant changes to it, other than we have added a responsibility section that align with the other reports that we've brought forward over the next little while, just to kind of, as we move into a more mature policy development process, we're just looking to align them as the best of our ability. And we think the addition of the roles and responsibilities piece, the one that we've had, really has been well received, particularly by staff. So we added that piece to that. But beyond that, there have been no significant changes, and we did verify it against the town's updated occupational health, safety, and workplace violence policy, which they updated earlier in the year, and we do still align.
Okay, thank you. Comments, questions? Can I get a go ahead, Susan.
I was just going to say I really appreciate having those components added to it. I think that's great.
Thank you. Are you happy enough to move the receipt? Thanks, Susan. Anybody further? Seconder to the receipt? Janet, thank you. Comments, questions? Objections to receiving it? Seeing none, that's received. And we move on to the CEO update, the highlight of every board meeting. And now I've lost everybody. So if anybody has to say anything, please jump in. There's a problem with the displays here. So just to members of the board, like Andrew, I now can't see any of you. So if you do wish to jump in, I will pause periodically for questions. Just you'll have to speak up. Don't wave at me, because I won't see you while the PowerPoint's up.
Okay. So everybody,
Oh, no, I will. No, I won't. There we go.
Oh, there we go. Everybody's favorite topic, COVID-19. So just reminding the board that we moved into step 3 as of last Friday. That was significant openings for a lot of Ontario, but for the library, it actually had minimal impact. The majority of our impacts were felt in step 2. So again, the only real change for us was that we moved from being open with a 25% capacity to being open with a capacity limited to the 2-meter physical distancing requirement. So that actually makes it a lot easier. Even before, we never really ever reached our limit. We have a limit that's slightly lower than this, particularly at some of our smaller branches, 16 Mile, Clearview, Woodside, which just don't have it's a bit challenging in those spaces just due to their side, unlike Glen Abbey and IR, which definitely have more capacity. That being said, we are making changes that aren't necessarily being driven by the province. We originally had a 72-hour quarantine, as was directed by the province. The province has removed the requirement for quarantine completely. We took a staggered approach, and as part of step 2, we actually moved from a 72 to a 24, and we'll be looking to completely eliminating that quarantine period in August, which will actually help facilitate access to some of our other spaces, because as you can imagine, our quarantine is taking up a lot of our rooms. As I mentioned previously, OPL is looking to return to normal hours in October. We're doing that work right now. It will take us that long simply because we're holding on to a significant number of vacancies. In order to be able to fill some of those hours, we're going to have to do some posting. So there'll be more information coming forward to the board on that. Some services will remain unavailable. Room rental is one of those. We are currently looking at procedures that we would need to put in place in order to be able to offer that. There are some requirements. Any organizations that we would rent to would need to have their own safety plan, and there are some other types of things. So just knowing the groups that we work with, they're not always that well structured. So how we can put some supports in place for when we do reoffer our room rentals, as well as indoor programming. We are planning for indoor programming, but that, again, as it says, we'll look to start likely in late September, early October. Of course, this is all subject to change. And as indicated, we are planning for what a 4th wave could look like. A traditional pandemic has 7 waves. So we aren't necessarily expecting a 4th wave to look like the first 3. Just given the vaccination rates, we're looking at more targeted outbreaks. There could be the extension of the masking. I know a lot of people are asking when those masking bylaws are going to be lifted, but I think those will need to remain in place if we're going to avoid further waves. And then there is also a growing concern about the impact of flu season and how we're going to transition from wearing masks and being a bit more protected into a regular type of flu season. We're working very closely with the town, particularly the emergency operations group on that, and keeping a close eye on England, as well as the US and Alberta, because those are definitely 3 different areas that have reduced restrictions and are seeing rises kind of happen. And so we're keeping an idea about how that is kind of producing, which will help us inform our decisions moving forward. Strategic planning. So I think I mentioned some of this last time, but OPL, we're working with Glenn Pothier to create draft pillars and goals, as well as revisit the mission, vision, and values. So Glenn and I had an initial review of all the information that we've gathered to date in order to kind of really solidify themes, both from what came from the board as part of your pre-strategic planning sessions, what we identified in the environmental scan, and what we saw with the community engagement piece. We have a staff session tomorrow with a number of the leadership team just to further develop those. From there, I'm actually holding the plan is to hold an all-staff town hall in early August and test some of the ideas with them as well. And then bring those all forward to the board at the special board meeting in August. We'll review the draft and the strategic goal recommendations in order for the board to be able to provide feedback and comments and any adjustments that they would like to see. And then we look to take that back, really look to finalize it and bring it back to the board for approval in September. The community engagement report, intent presented to everybody last week, last board meeting. There's been some back and forth on that final report, but I am expecting that. I'm expecting it tomorrow, but it might be a few days. But as soon as I get it, I'll be sure to forward it to the board so you have the most up-to-date information going into the August 26th meeting. So just an update on OPL.ca. That continues to be well received by both staff and the public. We were really excited to see that 202 new cards have been requested through the online card registration feature as of July 12th. So people are really jumping on that, and that's really exciting for us to see. Customer feedback that we've been getting through the online survey, people are happy with it, but that doesn't mean that they're happy with all of it. So as they provide feedback, we are tweaking and making adjustments as it goes. So we've added new carousels, we've added back in, people were very upset that the Explore functionality left, so we put that back in. We've updated some of the reading lists, and we'll continue to do that as we get feedback and kind of flush out the website once everybody has a chance to really use it in depth. We are still dealing with a couple single sign-on issues. Our program and events is still requiring people to do a separate sign-on. Communico, which is the back-end company who does that, needs to do an update to their back-end code, which we expect them to do in the next couple weeks, and that will resolve that issue. New York Times, not playing particularly nice with us, so that we're trying to figure out a workaround with ITS about that. And then the Oakville at War subsite is also, we're having to tweak that a little bit in order to make sure that it is set for when school starts again in September, because it is used as part of the Halton curriculum. And then we've identified a number of areas of improvement that we've submitted to ITS, and then we will be working with them over the next little bit to identify priorities and budgets and see how we can kind of incorporate those over the next couple of years. Life jackets, this is really exciting. So Recreation came to us with a proposal for the board to start loaning out life jackets, and I will say they launched and they were gone. We're actually in talks with Recreation about how we can get more of them, because people keep coming in looking for them and we just don't have the supply in certain sizes. We do have a number of infant life jackets, but the toddler and child size have just gone. So this is really, really exciting to see, and we'll be working closely with Rec and Culture to see how we can expand that, because they identified a really strong concern with kids not being in swimming lessons and the increase in backyard pools and how we can help our community stay safe. So that was a very exciting initiative for us. And then just a last kind of update about our partnership with the Toronto Rock Athletics Center. I mentioned that we created a partnership with them. The lacrosse kits that they've created for us are just about to go out to the branches. So they'll further flesh out our sport kits. And then they're going to support some of our early childhood literacy. They're going to participate in some of our programs, do some story times with some of their players. They also offered sponsorship and prizes for our summer reading program, which we're really excited about. But moving forward, we're really working with them on further exploring the history of lacrosse, and in particular, its relationship to Indigenous history. So that's going to be a really exciting project for us to move forward with, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where we can go with that. Happy to take any questions on any of that.
Members of the board, any questions on the report? Susan?
Yes, first I want to say, loving the life jacket program coming from aquatics years ago. I love that you're doing that. I also had a question about the room rental policy that you're developing. There's been a lot of information about HVAC systems and air handling and turning over the airspace. If you're looking at room rentals, has that been considered at all on your HVAC system and adjusting it for air circulation when people might be in a little smaller enclosed space?
So I do know that FCM did a lot of that work at the beginning, I think, of this year, or late last year, looking at airflow. I do know that we also just hired a company, and Colleen might be able to speak to this a bit more, to come in and do a more in-depth review of all town facilities. But that might be drive more capital things moving forward. But I do know that there was a group, and I can't remember the name of it, but a national group that really went through and identified for COVID safety the levels of airflow and rate return and all of that. And I do know that FCM went through and adjusted all our buildings for that.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Anybody else? Janet?
My question's about just tracking the return of things like the life jackets and even the tracking of the return of books. And I ask it from an actual personal thing because I discovered a book that I hadn't returned. And I never got a flag, and I thought, I didn't get an email. So when we loan out the life jackets, is it there's an email that reminds them to return it? I know it's an operational question, but I'm curious because there's a cost involved. They are in hot demand. So how does that work?
So anything that gets borrowed uses is the exact same system. So you do get reminders prior to, notifications, reminders prior to your due date. And then you should get reminders. It's odd that you didn't, because you definitely should. I think, and I don't remember the exact timeframes, although if Simona's on there, she might be able to jump in. I think it's 7 days, 14 days, and then there's another one, 48 days out, but you definitely should get reminders that it's due. So that's odd. I know, because I get them pretty regularly, so I think there's other board members that do as well. So maybe, Janet, you can give me that information. We can try and track down why you didn't, because that's unusual.
And how long are they allowed to have the life jackets for? Like, do they take them out for a week, or what's the? I think it's a great program. How long does somebody hold on to it for?
I don't actually know what the loan period is.
I believe it's 7 days. I would have to double check, but I believe it's 7 days, which is pretty standard. I think the sports kits are 7 days as well.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It's 7 days? Yeah, it's 7 days.
Further questions? Okay, I have a couple. On the life jackets, do we have any sort of liability or liability waivers that we are requiring signatures on?
We don't require them to sign it. However, we went through legal for all of this. However, there is a tag on it that the act of borrowing it is technically the signature. It is also in the record. So when they go and look at it, it clearly states that we are not responsible for it. And then there is something on it. We just don't necessarily require them to sign it. That wasn't necessary.
And are we doing any sort of training when you hand one of these over in terms of how to use them? I know, for example, when we were for years, and I think the region's still doing it, and agencies are doing it, proper training and installation of kids' car seats, for example. Are we doing anything like that for when we loan out these PFDs?
The staff aren't, but I think, and Simone, I'm not sure, I think there's something in there. Okay. Recreation provides it. I thought that there was some kind of pamphlet in there that kind of goes over that, but I will double check.
I mean, I guess with those things, it's pretty intuitive, but
it needs to be tight enough, right? Or else they just slip right out of it.
And the strap needs to go underneath as well in order so it doesn't float off. And what's the cleaning protocol on these things? Are we putting a lot of effort into making sure they're completely sanitized before they go out again, or?
Yeah, and again, Simona might want to jump in, but it's my understanding that Recreation has a whole sanitization process for their life jackets, and they take care of that.
Okay, terrific. On the website, you said that you've been getting feedback. Are there any notable comments that have come back, either concerns, anything missing, anything not working, anything notable that you can share? Either way, or for that matter, well, as they used to say in Abbey Oaks News, what was it? Kudos and brickbats. Are there any? What are the kudos and brickbats for the? For the website so far? Yeah,
I mean, we do hear good comments. We frequently hear about, it's not necessarily bad comments, it's that, where did this go? Like, where can I find this? And when I talk about the Explore, we heard about that. Some of those came directly to me. And those are people who were looking for, I want a list of all the books that were added in the last week, right? And we had not necessarily put that in. We had put curated lists up instead, but that's not what they wanted. So we went and we added the Explore, which is tied to our BiblioCommons, so that people can then get that. They can get their on order, they can get their just added, they can get all of that. We didn't quite realize how many people were accessing that on a daily basis. So we got that back in relatively quickly. We continue to tweak. Joe's been working with ITS and the Pixel Shop to tweak the federated search, because people are trying to find things and coming back and it's coming, I can't find it. So we're continuing to tweak some of that. It is extremely complicated because we are trying to build a search that searches multiple, our programming database, our BiblioCommons database, our HIP database, and that data is not all saved the same way. So we're continuing just to tweak that. And as we recommend that if people are having trouble finding things, let us know, because then we have a particular search that we can then kind of backtrack. So those have been probably the two most significant, other than where did this go, right? Because you're so used to going and just trying to identify where it had gone.
So it sounds that it's mostly routine items and easily to address concerns. That's what it sounds like to me at this point.
Yeah, mostly.
So nothing alarming or concerning or anything that's going to be a budgetary issue?
No, there's been nothing that is like, okay, no, we need to go back. It's a major issue. People are expressing some frustration, as they do every time we change, but nothing that Joe has identified that, okay, we really need to rethink. We may have gone off on a tangent here, and it doesn't align. It really has been, okay, we just have to, we used to be able to click here, now we have to click here. The federated search, I think, will be an ongoing thing as we kind of look at that, particularly when you have such diverse users. Some people just want to look for Harry Potter, and some people are very specific and actually use like Boolean language in there. So just tweaking it to make sure that they have access to do that, or even providing them workarounds. Because if you bypass the federated search and go right into BiblioCommons, it actually has an advanced search that I think some of them would find more helpful, because the federated search isn't necessarily designed for that. So we are looking at how we can kind of address some of those issues. But I think that is more of a long-term.
With respect to the federated search, is HIP info already integrated into that? I meant to look that up myself.
Yeah, so right now the federated search has 4 pieces to it. It has BiblioCommons, it has programming, it has the website itself for the first time, and then it also has the HIP database.
And we're working towards including the third-party API partners like Hoopla and programs like that?
Well, Hoopla, we add all our Hoopla records into BiblioCommons.
Okay.
Same with Canopy, and so we're trying to look at, because that's the easiest way for us to do that, so identify maybe, is there more vendors that we can just add the records directly into BiblioCommons rather than trying to feed another access point into federated search. But we are continuing to look at how we could possibly expand that moving forward, yes.
Okay, terrific. Going back to the board for a second, any further questions, anything come to mind? Stephen?
Hold on. Yeah, hi. Question. Sorry, my daughters are making dinner right behind me, so if you hear squabbles over who's having the roast chicken.
We'll be over right after the meeting.
A question. The 14-year-old that just left in embarrassment. Sophie, come back. They're nice people.
Most of us.
So my question is sorry, this is like, I'm about 15 minutes old here, but Tara, do you have a sense of the employee population, what the vaccination rate is of the employee population?
No, we don't ask that.
Yeah, no, I sorry, I appreciate you can't ask, but do you have a sense of it?
I would, just from conversations I've had, I would say it's probably a significant amount, but again, we don't necessarily ask. It's just comments that I've heard and people who've asked for time off in order to be able to go to their vaccination. I couldn't give you any kind of percentage, but I also am very conscious of the type of staff that we have, and I would say it would surprise me if we weren't at a significant amount.
Yeah, well, and that was kind of my gut feel, and I appreciate we can't quantify this. I was just getting your impression, so thank you.
On that note, are we actively promoting it amongst the staff?
Very much so.
Okay, great. I had one more quick question. I meant to write it down, and I just remembered it as Stephen was talking. The online card registration program, you said 202, was that?
Yes, yeah.
Are we going to track those so we know if people actually utilize services, bricks and mortar services, or whether those are strictly people that are registering for online? I'd be curious whether we're encouraging, whether that is a service that will actually encourage people to come into the building, and if not, how would we market towards that? Say, hey, now you got this new virtual card, come and visit us and see what we really got.
Yeah, I mean, and we've set it up so when people get a card online, they don't get a physical card, and they get, in our database, it's almost viewed as temporary. So it gives them a certain amount of access, but in order to get full access, they need to come into the branch and verify, their address, and then they get a physical card. So there is a way to kind of track that transition. And as well, we've talked about this before, and I'm hoping, I know that Joe and I've had some conversations, and moving forward is actually start to put in emails that when you first register, you get a welcome email, and then 2 weeks later, you get an email that, just provide them like in stages of new information that they may not be aware of. So that's something that we're hopefully going to be able to implement before too much longer.
And last thing on this particular issue, and that is, are we tracking any demographics in terms of the online registrations too, in terms of people who may be lapsed card holders versus people who are new residents, people who versus people who are just jazzed about becoming part of the library now that this facility is available?
So if they're just lapsed users, they'd already be in the database. So I'm not sure they could register for a new card. They probably would have to come in.
Even if the database has been purged after.
Well, as long as they're in our database. So if they haven't been a card holder, say for 7 years, then likely they have been purged, and then they'll be re-entered. And we will track. We won't necessarily be able to tell that they were and then they're not because that's gone. But we'll be able to, like, we track, postal code and all those kind of pieces. So we can definitely see where the new registrations are coming from. We've done that traditionally anyway for that. But did that answer your question? I don't think it did.
I feel personally it would be interesting to know how that new service impacts the overall service delivery in terms of are we bringing new people in? So ultimately, is it a net positive, or is it simply just a convenience for people who would have otherwise come to register? It is more to do with developing, additional online programs in the future. How much more convenient can we make things in order to encourage greater use? So I think this is a great example of how that could be a catalyst for, bringing new people into the fold, so to speak. And I'd be curious how that's working.
Yeah, because I think we'd have to look at, say 2019 new card registrants, and then, 2021 new card registrants. Is it roughly the same amount? And now it's just broken up between these two methods, or are we seeing that the in-branch is remaining the same and we're seeing these additional through online? Yeah, we can look at
You'd
that.
probably have to do a crosstab to figure out, the growth of the community versus the new cards versus, anyway, it would just be I think it'd be an interesting study to understand how online access is impacting, again, the growth of our service, as opposed to just simply, shuffling the access points.
Okay.
I'm not sure if anybody else is interested in that, but I think I would find that very interesting. I'm seeing a couple nodding heads, so thank you for supporting me and not making me feel all alone. Okay, members of the board, are there any further questions on the CEO's report? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion to receive, please. Steve and Bill, thank you. Any objections to the receipt of the report? I do not see any. Thank you for an excellent report again. Members of the board, I want to draw your attention to our agenda. We are now moving into confidential discussion items. We require a motion to go in camera, and we are going in camera tonight to deal with personal matters about identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees, and this is a double one tonight. Also, labor relations or employee negotiations. So it's a double in camera tonight. Members of the board, is there anybody willing to give me a motion to go into camera for those particular reasons? I am looking for Susan, thank you, and Bill, terrific. Any objections to going in camera? I do not see any, so we will now prepare ourselves for going in camera. To members of the public who've been watching, and I hope that there are lots, we are going into camera now, which means that we are discussing matters that we cannot discuss in public session. We will only come back into public session to pass essentially the adjournment. So if you have other things to do tonight, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time. Otherwise, stick with us and we'll see you in a little while.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Members of the board, I report that we have been meeting in closed session for the purposes of dealing with personal matters about identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees, as well as labor relations or employee negotiations. We passed no resolutions in closed session, but we do have direction coming out of closed session, and the motion would be to receive the report on labor relations. Would somebody give me a motion for that, please, to receive that report? Pankaj and Susan, any objection? That's carried. The second matter we have to address is a motion to approve the staff recommendation that was presented in public session with respect to item number 2. Can I get a motion to that? And actually, Andrew, do you want to move? Do you want to make a motion? I haven't been able to see your hand, and you're not in the minutes at all. Would you like to make that motion?
So moved.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? And Stephen, any objections? Hopefully not, because we can't air those in open session. Seeing none, that is approved. Thank you very much for your time and attention to that very important matter. Members of the board, do we have any new business to discuss this evening? Stephen.
I'll keep it very, very brief. This is just simply a matter of a point of information. People may be aware, I was just made aware today, again, just for information. Our colleagues to the north, Halton Hills Public Library, just put out an RFP for library strategic plan and brand development. So I thought that's of interest. I was actually approached by a local consultant to be part of the team, and obviously I recused myself from being part of it. But I just thought it's interesting that our neighbors to the north are doing that. The RFP was issued a couple of days ago with it's a public document. I'm happy to send it, but I just mentioned as a point of information.
That's interesting. It would be interesting if you could circulate. I think it'd be fascinating to read. I think it's a testament to the fact that, especially during the pandemic, we've all learned as a society how vital our libraries are to us, and so, putting that extra effort into planning for their future is certainly something that every municipality needs to give serious consideration to, and take the leadership that Oakville is constantly known for. Any further new business? I don't see any. So members of the board, our next meeting is on September 23rd, 2021 at 7 p.m. We do have a special meeting in the interim that's been canvassed, and you have notice of that for the purposes of the strategic plan. But for the purposes of the actual next formal board meeting, it's September 23rd. And now I'll be looking for motion to adjourn today's session. Janet, thank you. Seconded by? Susan, thank you very much. Any objection to adjournment? I dare you. No objection. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for your time and attention. It was a great meeting as usual. Have a great evening, everybody.
Bye all.
Thank you.
Bye.